and it was at that very moment that her sweet little life changed forever. Chapter 1. 5 years later. After finishing his Sunday morning sermon, Jillian's pastor took a seat in the pulpit, and the choir sang a song she hadn't heard before. It was a nice song, though, and the words made her think about the one thing she thought about every day of her life. If God loved her so much, why hadn't he saved her from her father? Especially since she always tried her best to be a good girl and was. Everyone said so. Her mother, her grandparents, her teachers, everyone. So what she was going through didn't make any sense. It was true that 7 years ago, when her father had first come into their lives, she couldn't have been happier. He'd been so wonderful to her, and it had only been a matter of months before her mom and he had fallen in love and gotten married. They'd wasted no time, and Jillian had been thrilled to finally have her own dad, the same as her cousins, friends, and schoolmates. Of course, not everyone had a dad living in the house with them. For one, her best friend Nikki didn't, but for the most part, everyone else around her did. She'd been excited, because with the exception of a few old photos, she'd never seen her biological father or even spoken to him by phone. To this very day, he'd never tried contacting her, not in all of her 12 years, and she couldn't help wondering why he didn't want her. She also couldn't help thinking about the conversation she and her mother had had only 1 month ago. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Jillian had said one day when the two of them were in the car heading to a burger joint. "Sure, sweetie, what is it?" "Do you think I'll ever see my real father?" At first, her mother hadn't said anything, obviously shocked about the question, but finally she responded. "I really don't know." "Do you think it would be okay if I looked for him?" There had been more silence, and this time her mother's pause had been longer than it was before. "Is there something wrong, honey?" "No." "And what about the father you have now? Isn't he all that you could have ever hoped for?" Over the last 5 years, Jillian had mastered the art of acting, and to prove it, she said, "Oh, yes, Mom. He's the best daddy in the world, and I've loved him since the very beginning." "Then why are you asking about your biological father?" "I don't know. For some reason, I've been thinking about him a lot lately." Her mother had driven into the parking lot of the burger joint, found a spot to park in, turned off the ignition, and then turned slightly toward Jillian. "Sweetie, I know I've never said much about your father, but now that you're a lot more curious about him, and rightfully so, I think it's time I tell you everything." "Like what?" "Well, first of all, he didn't just leave us. No, T.C. Maxwell left us while I was still carrying you. I was 6 months pregnant, and all I know is that one morning I got up and went to work, but when I came home, he was gone. He never even had the decency to say goodbye, and he took all the bit of money we had to our names. He left me with nothing, and I was devastated." Jillian was stunned. "Why did he do that? I mean, didn't he even want to see what I looked like?" "I don't know, honey. I don't know what was going through his head back then, but a few weeks before he left, all he talked about was how he wanted to move back to Chicago. That was where he lived before I met him, and he never really liked living here in Mitchell. Said it was too slow and not at all like the life he'd become accustomed to. For a number of years, I guess he used to sing in a band and perform at various Chicago nightclubs." "Well, why didn't you want to go with him?" "Because he wasn't the most stable person when it came to keeping a job. We only dated for 6 months, and during that time, he quit 2 different jobs. Then, once we were married, he quit another 2 jobs during that 6-month period. And it was right after that he walked out." "And you never once heard from him since then?"